Welcome to Balancing the Scales, the Economic Justice Report. This is your host, Vic Bernsdorf, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about the immediate threats to Social Security. Let's start with an overview of that topic. Let me just say that a lot of people in America really depend on Social Security. Without that, they'd be on the street or they'd go broke. It's an incredibly important program designed to do exactly the opposite, to keep people in their homes, to give them an ability to live in dignity so they can pay their bills. That program has never been more under threat than it is right now. So let's watch this short video clip. We'll come back and talk about it.
Social Security has eliminated the vast majority of elderly poverty in America. Today, the program is solely responsible for lifting 22 million Americans out of poverty. That includes about a third of our senior citizens. Half of Black and Hispanic retirees make 90% of their income from Social Security. It might be the most effective anti-poverty program in the history of this country.
So, just to follow up on that clip, according to the Social Security Administration, nearly a quarter of older married couples and almost half of single retirees count on Social Security for at least 90% of their income. Without Social Security, elderly poverty rates would hit above 40%, folks. Okay? President Trump has made it very clear that his goal is to permanently eliminate the funding, the taxes that are taken out of your paycheck to fund Social Security. He made that clear. Okay? And if that happens, Social Security would become permanently depleted by the middle of calendar year 2023. Not too far away, right? Now, the president hasn't said this would defund Social Security. Instead, what he's doing is, he suggested financial support for the program could come from or will come from the government's general fund. But this is where it gets really tricky and you have to be very vigilant. It's important to remember the Republicans have always hated Social Security for two reasons. Number one, it destroys their ideology that the American government is always the enemy of the people in their eyes. And secondly, that the private sector is supposed to do everything else better than the public sector. Everything else better, right? In providing services to their citizens, right? With no exceptions. We'll watch a video in a minute that completely dispels their ideology regarding that issue. But let's take an in-depth look now on what the threats are and what's coming down the pipeline at us if we're not vigilant and vote our representatives out of office who are trying to destroy the Social Security program. Now, Social Security currently pays out about $1 trillion in benefits to workers every year. Even with the dedicated funding stream it has from employers and employees right now, the trust fund could run out in 2035. If payroll taxes stop coming in, a huge amount of additional funding, money, will be needed every year out of the general fund to pay for the program. Unless taxes are raised to compensate, making that change, going from a dedicated funding stream to the general fund, is going to blow up the deficit, right? Now, follow me on this, right? With funding coming out of the general fund, with funding for the Social Security program coming out of the Treasury's general fund, and this is where you got to watch out for. The Republican Party can blame and probably will blame Social Security for that running that deficit. At that point, cuts to Social Security benefits will be called for by the Republican Party, and Social Security amounts will be cut by whatever amount. But they will be cut. The bottom line is, funding from the Social Security program, from the general fund revenue, without a dedicated tax source, would undermine the entire history of how Social Security is supposed to work. Then it would be essentially just another form of government-funded welfare program, vulnerable to the whims of Republican lawmakers, right? The whole program would become unstable and unreliable at that point. Basically, the earned benefit program that Social Security is, and they kept millions of people out of poverty for 85 years, would cease to exist as we know it. Personal story now. A recipient on Social Security, name is Nancy Stokes, lives in Baldwin Borough, Pennsylvania. And I'll be quoting from the reference sources. By the way, all reference sources we find in the description section of the show today. So let me just quote from Nancy Stokes, Social Security recipient. And she says, "The home where Nancy Stokes, who's 75 years old, has lived in for more than half a century is filled with memories. Photos from her wedding day, her 4 daughters, 8 grandchildren, and 1 great-granddaughter. Social Security has helped the genial redhead stay in her suburban Pittsburgh house despite her share of challenges." The article continues, 3 decades ago, her husband Frank died of throat cancer. To support herself, she started a home daycare for kids in her neighborhood, but she was forced into retirement 7 years ago after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Social Security is her only source of income, a $1,500 monthly spousal benefit. And she says in her words, and I quote, "Without Social Security, I would have to sell the house. I barely make it. I just hope nothing breaks down." End of quote. Okay? Folks, let's not mess with Nancy's meager income. Okay? Her life's already hard enough. But if Trump and the Republican Party get their way, the scenario I described will take place and destroy Nancy's life completely. Okay? And there's another way the Republicans have come up with to attack Social Security program. It's called the Eagle Plan. Specifically, the Eagle Plan is going to give you $5,000. We'll give every American $5,000 in exchange for a 3 months deferral of eligibility for Social Security and Medicare benefits. Okay? Let's watch the video and come back and talk about it.
Essentially, the federal government would allow Americans to tap into the $1 trillion worth of money that has already been set aside in the Social Security trusts. So instead of robbing Peter to pay Paul, you would be robbing future you to pay current you. So here are some of the pros and cons. The pro is that the government already has trillions of dollars set aside in the Social Security trust programs. The downside is that they run a real risk of disrupting the Social Security benefits program. So what would happen is you would be given $5,000 now, and then you would give a future IOU back to the federal government. And what would happen is once you reach the age where you're able to turn on Social Security benefits, you would say, I want to turn these on. I'm now 65 or 67 or 70 or whatever. And then there would be a 3 to 4 or 5 month delay on when you would get that first check, and that's when they would pay it back. So that's kind of the gist of the program. There is real danger, though, in depleting trillions of dollars that could be earning future interest for future Americans that would need those Social Security benefit programs.
So don't buy into it, folks. You know, it's a Republican idea designed to ruin the Social Security program entirely. Okay? Remember, the Republican Party has not created a single government program that has helped the middle class or the poor. Why? They're not their constituents. The middle class and the poor are not the constituents of the Republican Party. They don't care about that, okay? If you don't believe me, check out the Republican Party's history of creating legislation that helps the middle class and the poor, okay? And getting back to the Eagle Plan. The Eagle Plan is basically a willful refusal to understand the nature of Social Security, which is insurance, not a piggy bank. It replaces wages lost when a worker retires, becomes disabled, or dies, leaving dependents, okay? Workers earn these benefits with every paycheck they work for. And turning Social Security from a guaranteed insurance into a private account, that's a long-standing goal of Wall Street, billionaires, and the Republican Party, who are the benefactors. Okay? Right now, Wall Street gets absolutely no money from Social Security at all. But if the program were converted into hundreds of millions of private accounts, Wall Street would make a huge windfall on that. Let's have a look at what happened in Chile as an ominous sign of what could happen in this country if we ever go in that direction. Let's check this out and be right back.
Nothing infuriates Chileans of all walks of life more than their compulsory private retirement system, or AFP. It was created under Chile's military dictatorship and was supposed to guarantee pensions equivalent to 70% of one's last paycheck. Instead, 10 to 20% is the average. With good reason, the AFPs are the #1 target of millions of protesters' wrath. Chile's pension funds make massive profits, which are not redistributed to the contributors, even as pensions drop. In Chile, the suicide rate for elderly people has soared, and one of the prime reasons is because they no longer have enough money with which to survive.
Isn't that disgusting, folks? People worked 35, 40 years to get a few $100 in their pension, can't afford to live properly, committing suicide, living in poverty. Folks, that's the direction the Republican Party wants to take this country. Why? Like I said, they want to take us back to the conditions that existed in the year 1900, okay? When you basically had vast amounts of poverty and billionaires and a really thin merchant class. And that's pretty much it, okay? Thomas Jefferson was right. The price of freedom really is eternal vigilance, and we have to be vigilant at everything the Republican Party tries to do to take away your hard-earned benefits, okay? Listen, the Republican Party never sleeps. Over the weekend, Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, proposed cutting Social Security in his debate in an election year. Can you imagine that? Then there was Senator Stephen Daines, Republican from Montana, introduced a bill to codify Trump's unilateral defunding of Social Security, again in an election year. And Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa, calls for a lot of changes to be made to Social Security, but behind closed doors, in her words, which isn't where you do popular things to get votes, right? You know, in my opinion, the Republican Party, they stay awake each and every night trying to get the U.S. back to the form of fascism we had in 1900. Before Teddy Roosevelt broke up the monopolies and his cousin Franklin Roosevelt created New Deal programs, which helped all Americans. Okay? And let me say this again. Back in 1900, you just had the very rich and the very poor, not much else. In fact, in 1900, I think it was 1900, that J.D. Rockefeller got pretty close to becoming the world's first trillionaire converted in today's dollars. And all those great social benefits and programs that the Democrats and the labor unions fought for and won didn't exist yet. Social benefits like the 8-hour day, child labor laws, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, paid vacation, health benefits, sick leave, and OSHA, which is the department which keeps workers safe on the job, right? These benefits that we enjoy today and that makes life worth living were all created by the Democrats and their friends, the labor unions. Okay? But back, like I said, back in 1900, Americans suffered without these benefits, and corporations enjoyed unbridled capitalism. They could do whatever they want. They were basically gods on earth, to treat their workers any way they pleased, without having to worry about interference from the government that might hurt their profits. There were no child labor laws, environmental laws, worker safety regulations. Okay? The C corporations and their benefactors, the Republican Party, want desperately to go back to those days, and they will stop at nothing to get there. Okay? In my opinion. But Trump is basically going down that path, and the Republican Party is right behind him. Now notice I said C corporations, not B corps or benefit corporations. I talked about those business entities in another show. B corps and benefit corporations are companies that are structured to have a social conscience. They're structured so that their daily operations benefit the environment, the communities that they operate in, and their employees. But back to Social Security. If you are now or will be a Social Security recipient, regardless of your party affiliation, folks, you should review your political candidates' positions on Social Security. Right now, election's coming up. And whoever you plan on voting for, what is their position on preserving Social Security? Or what is their position on it at all? Okay? And consider that before casting your vote for them. Okay? I'll go one further. To my Republican viewers, I'd like to issue a challenge. If you earn, let's say, $75,000 or less per year, try going on a 2-year Republican-free diet. What I mean is, for 2 years, just mentally switch to becoming an independent voter. Okay? Then during those 2 years, look at the legislation the Republican Party initiates and passes, and ask yourself, do they create stimulus programs that would help you and your family stay afloat during this coronavirus pandemic, or at all? If the programs are passed into law, would they hurt or help your family? Would they hurt or help your personal economic situation? You know, I'm just curious to know how the Republican Party earns your vote. Okay? And then after 2 years, if Republican legislation hasn't helped you, well, maybe you might want to consider your reason for voting for them or belonging to that party in the first place. Okay? Just a thought. Okay? There's no harm or shame in changing one's mind. I do it often in my life as new information comes in. Life is not static, folks. It changes all the time, and you got to change with it. That's the show for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Next week, I'll be talking about a B Corp called a Bar Nana Company and how the gig economy is making all Americans poorer. Have a great day, and always remember, you deserve the government you vote for.